The rain had been falling all day, a steady, soft drizzle that blurred the world outside the kitchen window. The sound of it against the glass was rhythmic, calming, and for Jason Thomas, a man who had long since stopped believing in simple peace, it was a welcome companion. His world was far from peaceful. Before we begin this journey, if you believe that kindness can rewrite the stories we live and that every life is worth saving, consider subscribing to our channel. We have many more heartfelt journeys ahead, ones that will touch your heart in unexpected ways. Now, let's begin. Jason had never imagined himself as a hero, but sometimes life doesn't ask for permission. It just hands you a new chapter and expects you to write it. When his neighbor, a kind woman named Leah, had passed away suddenly, Jason found himself with 4 children in his care. Children who had no one else to turn to. His own house was small. He had his daughter, Emma, a little girl who barely remembered her mother. And now for more mouths to feed, for more lives to shape, protect, and somehow make sense of. The rain continued to fall, and inside the warm glow of Jason's modest kitchen, the clinking of dishes and the hum of the refrigerator were the only sounds that kept him grounded. The children, ages ranging from 2 to 12, were huddled around the table, eyes wide with confusion and exhaustion. Their lives had been turned upside down in a matter of days, and Jason was a stranger who would have to make sense of it all. They hadn't spoken much since they arrived, just days before, leaving behind a world of warmth and security that no longer existed. Jason wasn't sure how to handle them, how to bridge the distance between his own grief and theirs. But there was a responsibility here he couldn't ignore. The oldest, a quiet 12-year-old boy named Sam, was the first to stir in the awkward silence. His eyes flicked to Jason, then to his younger siblings. He didn't seem angry, just lost. Jason could feel the weight of his gaze, the unspoken fear, and he felt a pang in his chest. This wasn't how any of them had imagined their world would be. But then there was Emma, his daughter. She sat at the end of the table, her legs swinging beneath the chair. She was the only one who seemed to accept the shift in their lives without much questioning, though Jason knew it wasn't without its own cost. She had already learned the sting of loss too early. Jason glanced over at the small photo of his wife on the mantel, a picture from happier days before everything changed, before he was left to raise Emma alone. It was funny how life had a way of stealing things, making sure you never had the chance to catch your breath before it took another piece. And yet, here they were, 4 orphaned children, a daughter, and a father who was only beginning to realize that his capacity for love, for survival, was about to be tested in ways he never imagined. He didn't know it yet, but these kids he was now responsible for, were about to change his life in a way no one could have predicted. Before we continue, a quick reminder. If you're touched by stories of hope, transformation, and the surprising ways life unfolds, make sure to subscribe and join us on this journey. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty and adjustment. Jason's small home, already tight with just him and Emma, now felt even smaller with the addition of Leah's children. But something inside Jason pushed him to keep going. The sight of Sam, standing at the window as though waiting for someone who would never return, made him feel like there was no other choice. It was Emma who brought life back to the house. Her presence, her energy, was like a spark that refused to be dimmed. She offered little moments of joy in the chaos, like when she insisted they make cookies, or when she gently coaxed the youngest, Lily, into drawing with her. One evening, as Jason sat in the dimly lit living room, his eyes fell on the family photo album Leah had left behind. It was the only thing that had made it through the storm of grief that had swept through her life. He opened it slowly, letting the pages turn one by one. The kids' lives were captured in every image: birthdays, school plays, summers by the lake. And then, near the end of the album, something caught his eye. A picture of Leah, young and vibrant, with a man standing beside her. A man Jason didn't recognize. He turned the page. There was again another photo, this time of Leah with a group of people, dressed in what looked like an extravagant gala, a private event, and Leah was holding hands with the same man. Jason's heart skipped. Who was he? And why was this photo so different from the others? As the days passed, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something wasn't right. The children's mother had been a mystery in many ways. Quiet, reserved, always content with her small life. But the more Jason looked at the photographs, the more he began to wonder, could Leah have been hiding something? Was there more to her past than she had ever let on? One evening, after the children were asleep, Jason found himself again looking through the album, trying to connect the dots. That's when he noticed something. The name on a letter hidden in the back of the album, Monroe. It was familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. The next morning, Jason decided to do something he never thought he would. He would investigate. As he sat at the kitchen table, a thought struck him. Could Leah's past be the key to everything? Could these children's inheritance, their mother's secret, be hidden in plain sight? What if Leah had been more than just a mother? What if she had been an heiress? Jason's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. When he opened it, the woman standing on the other side nearly took his breath away. She was dressed impeccably in a suit that spoke of wealth and sophistication, with eyes that gleamed with a knowing look. "Mr. Thomas?" she asked in a voice that held power, yet softened by something like concern. "I'm here to talk to you about the Monroe estate." Jason's heart raced. The Monroe estate? Could it be? Was this the family Leah had been hiding from them all this time? Before he could respond, the woman spoke again. "There's much you don't know, and it's time you learned." As Jason stood there, frozen in the doorway, the woman's words hung in the air like a storm about to break. His mind raced. Leah an heiress? What did this mean for the children? For him? How had he missed it all these years? He stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. But as the woman walked past him, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew was about to unravel. The truth was no longer just a question. It was a reckoning. Jason's heart pounded as the woman in front of him stepped across the threshold of his home, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. He closed the door behind her, feeling a rush of confusion and dread. Everything he thought he knew about Leah and her children, about his life, was now in jeopardy. The woman, tall, sharp-featured, and dressed in a dark suit that suggested wealth, walked with purpose as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Her cold, calculating eyes scanned the room, lingering on the children's drawings on the fridge, the cluttered kitchen table, and the modest furniture that adorned the space. "Mr. Thomas," she began again, her voice low but firm, "my name is Amanda Green. I represent the Monroe Family Trust. I assume you're familiar with the name, though perhaps you haven't been aware of its significance." Jason blinked, struggling to grasp the weight of what she was saying. "The Monroe family?" "Yes, Mr. Thomas," she continued. "Leah Monroe, your late neighbor, was not just an ordinary woman. She was an heiress, the only living descendant of the Monroe family fortune." Jason's mind reeled. He had spent years next door to Leah, thinking she was just a quiet, kind-hearted single mother who kept to herself. He had no idea at all. How could I have missed this? Jason asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she tell the kids?" Amanda didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a document. It was old, the edges worn, and it looked like something out of a courtroom drama. She handed it to Jason, who took it hesitantly, scanning the first few lines. "This is the official will and testament of Leah Monroe. It states that upon her passing, her estate is to be divided among her 4 children, with you, Mr. Thomas, appointed as their legal guardian in the event of her untimely death." Amanda's tone didn't change, but Jason could feel the gravity of her words. But there's something else. Leah's inheritance was complicated. Jason's breath hitched as he absorbed the reality. He was a guardian of children who were now heirs to a fortune, to power, to a life he could never have imagined for them, or himself. Amanda continued. Leah never wanted to be a part of the family business, a massive conglomerate, and she went to great lengths to hide her identity. She created a new life, one where she could live freely, away from the expectations that come with such a legacy. She wanted nothing more than to give her children a normal life. And yet, that was a life they can never truly have. Not anymore. Jason turned to face her, the pieces of the puzzle finally starting to fit together. "So what happens now? Why are you here, then?" Amanda's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. Because, Mr. Thomas, there are people who will do anything to claim the Monroe fortune. And those children, your children now, are the key to it all. Their identities have to be kept secret, and I'm here to ensure they are protected. Jason's head spun. He had just opened the door to a world of danger and betrayal. But what was his role in all of this? He wasn't part of any family business. He was just a single dad, trying to make his way through life, doing his best to raise his daughter, and now, unexpectedly, these 4 orphaned kids. They're just kids, Jason muttered. They don't know anything about this. Amanda's eyes softened, just for a moment. I understand, but you need to understand that what you've stepped into is much bigger than you ever anticipated. There are powerful forces at play, and they will stop at nothing to get what they think is theirs. Jason's hand shook slightly as he processed her words. This was no longer about giving these kids a place to stay, a safe haven. This was about protecting them, keeping them away from people who could manipulate them, use them, or worse, hurt them. I didn't sign up for this, Jason said, his voice strained. I'm aware of that, but this is your reality now, Amanda said, her tone no longer as cold but still commanding. I'll help you navigate it, but you have to understand that from this point on, your life and the children's lives are going to change. It will be harder. You'll have to make decisions that are difficult. Jason wasn't sure what scared him more, the idea of losing these kids, or the idea of what might happen if he didn't protect them from the truth. Later that night, as Jason lay awake, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was in way over his head. The sound of the rain against the roof was no longer soothing. It was a constant reminder of the storm that had just hit his life. The 4 children slept in the rooms down the hall, tucked into the same beds they had occupied for the last few days. Emma was beside him in her bed, her breathing steady and calm. She had fallen asleep with a stuffed animal clutched in her arms, as if the toy could shield her from the uncertainties that lay ahead. Jason had always believed that family was about love, about being there for one another when the world falls apart. But this wasn't what he had signed up for. He had known hardship, but this was something else entirely. This was a game with stakes he didn't understand, a game where he wasn't sure he even had the rules. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Dad." It was Emma's voice, small and uncertain. He rose quickly, his heart racing. He crossed the room and opened the door. She was standing there in her pajamas, looking up at him with those wide, innocent eyes. "I can't sleep," she said softly. Jason sighed and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You're not alone, Emma. We're all in this together." "I know, but do you think the other kids will be okay?" Her voice was barely a whisper, a tremor in her words. Jason felt his chest tighten. He wasn't sure if he was telling her the truth, but he knew one thing. He would do everything he could to make sure they were okay. "I think they'll be just fine," he said, though his voice lacked certainty. As he settled back into bed, with Emma snuggled up beside him, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was already starting to unravel, and the lives of these children, their futures, were tied to a mystery far larger than he could ever have imagined. The next morning, Amanda was gone, leaving behind only the promise to stay in touch. But something in Jason's gut told him that this wasn't over, that nothing about this new life was simple. Days passed, and Jason tried his best to return some sense of normalcy, but it was harder than he could have anticipated. The children began to show signs of settling in, but the questions from the past kept creeping into their lives. Sam, the oldest, had become more distant, withdrawn, and Jason couldn't help but notice the quiet glances the boy would share with him when they thought no one was looking. It was clear Sam was struggling. He had lost everything: his home, his mother, his identity. He had been thrust into a life he wasn't prepared for, and Jason wasn't sure how to guide him through it. There was only so much he could do. Then, just as Jason was starting to think that things were beginning to settle into some sort of routine, the phone rang. It was Amanda. "Mr. Thomas," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "You need to get the children out of there. Now!" Jason's heart skipped. "What? Why? What's going on?" "You've been followed," she said. "Someone knows where you are, and they'll stop at nothing to get the children." The line went silent. Jason's pulse quickened. What was going on? Who was following them? And what did Amanda mean by they? He glanced down the hallway toward the kids, all still asleep. The heavy weight of this new reality bore down on him like an iron cage. Then, in that moment, it hit him. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The doorbell rang. Jason froze. He had been expecting this, but not like this. In the next room, the kid stirred. His mind raced. Who was at the door? Were they the ones Amanda warned him about? Jason stood motionless, his hand still gripping the phone. He knew his life had just changed forever. And the question wasn't whether he could protect the kids. It was whether he could keep them safe long enough to uncover the truth. If you're wondering what happens next, how Jason navigates this new, dangerous life, and whether he can protect the children from the shadows that now surround them, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. You won't want to miss what comes next. Life is full of twists, and sometimes the truth can be the most dangerous thing of all.